I'm now speaking with Nicole King. Nicole, you too went to Washington, D.C. to the Justice or Else march. You know, what does that mean, Justice or Else? What is that about?
For me, it was about finding equality and understanding what, as a group, not just myself, but as a group, what our people were interpreting that as. It was the first time I had been around so many of us who were from different ethnicities, had been raised differently, who felt the same way about treatment of my fellow brothers and sisters. So justice for me was about finding the meaning of equality. Not what was given to me as the meaning of equality, but what we were viewing it as with current day.
But why? But why did you go? Was not.
I went because I have a 14-year-old son. And Fort Wayne I'm not born and raised in Fort Wayne. I was born in Connecticut, and then, which is a very big melting pot, because I grew up in Jersey, which was around Jewish and Italians and blacks and Cubans and Mexicans and Puerto Ricans. And then I moved to Gary, Indiana, which was all black. And then I had gone away to college, and I had cultural shock, because for me, my entire graduating class was black. All of my teachers were black.
Wait, you graduated from where?
Lew Wallace High School in Gary, Indiana.
Okay.
So when I went away to college, I had culture shock because I was not the majority anymore. I moved to Fort Wayne, and something I noticed about Fort Wayne, I work very heavily in non-for-profits. In Fort Wayne, they don't so much care about color here as they care about bottom line dollar. My son, I do not see him staying in Fort Wayne, and I wanted him to get a feel for what his people were facing outside of this small community. As big as Fort Wayne is, it's more of a country town with a city setting. So I went because I wanted my 14-year-old son to see and feel the power of us when we're gathered together for the purpose of unity. He had never experienced that. We go to church together, and there's a group of us at church, or we'll go to a basketball game and there's a group of us at a basketball game. But who is showing my son that when we gather, it's more about our rights, more about how we're viewed. And I needed for him to see something other than what was being displayed on TV for us, for the Fergusons and the Baltimores. I needed him to see something beside that. And that's exactly what he left seeing. He was empowered. When he got to the car, the first thing he said, "I'm even more focused." I knew I had a good kid, but for him, he saw that he had to set an example. So it wasn't so much for me because I had grown up seeing so much. It was for him because I knew he had not.
So now, the feeling of empowerment, to be around all those people, for being in this Fort Wayne environment, let's say for years, and then going to that environment there, how were your eyes reopened?
Oh, for me, I think that one of the biggest eye-opening experiences of the event for me was that although we all lived in these different corners of the earth, that we were all interpreting the world the same way. We were all seeing that we don't hold a majority vote. We see ourselves everywhere, but we're not depicted very fairly. We don't feel like our voices are being heard. And we were unified in that opinion. It wasn't like, when I came back, one of my biggest problems was everybody's attitude was, well, so what? You had the march, now what? But it was the momentum that the marches bring. Every year, more people are made aware. More people are hearing the struggles. When my son saw Sandra Bland's family come up and Tamar Rice's family come up and Eric Gardner, it became real for him. It was not a TV story. Those were breathing heartbeats that he was seeing on that stage. So I guess that the difference between me being here with my people is there were so many of us. There's strength in numbers. The more of you are gathered, you feel that backing. I felt the strength behind my brothers and sisters. I had never seen these people before, but yet I stood arm in arm in them and cheered at the same things and smiled at the same things and became disenchanted with the same parts of how we're being treated. And I don't think that we here gather that. We will individually do things. You'll have churches don't group together like they used to. They have their views over here and these views over there. But for this one day, we were all brought together, and I realized that we all see things the same way. No matter where you're living, you're faced with the same struggles I am. My sons will be faced with the same struggles that the men in California are. And it was empowering because people who lived that life gave him a voice, gave him words to use. He learned new terms. He no longer calls himself black. He calls himself indigenous because of something he heard there. It wasn't that I had taught him wrong. It's just that he interpreted himself a different way after being around so many of us.
What you described, when you mentioned that that individually we do things, but collectively we don't, it seems as though part of that fear is we don't want to upset white people.
I agree. I agree that sometimes that slave mentality of pleasing the massa comes through us. It's kind of hard to undo repeated behavior. They say it takes 21 days to create a new habit. Well, over years and years, imagine the nature versus nurture that has gone into training us. Because we were trained, we were taught to behave a certain way. It's hard to undo that when you've passed it down from generation to generation. And we have, what was different about the Million Man March is we passed down anger. The Million Man March wasn't about being angry. It was about being organized and having a direction. And there were, if you were listening, there were examples and options and opportunities given for you to explore those options. There are committees for you to join. Now it becomes down to now the each one teach one. Now what I learned, it wouldn't be fair if I just kept it to myself. It is now my job, now that I know this, I know that there are committees. I know that the Nation of Islam is buying land to build houses and farms and flourish beyond what is provided, has been provided to us. So that mentality is something that has to be undone, but it's a learned behavior, but now it has to be unlearned. And we don't really empower each other to learn. When one brother sees or gets knowledge, he tends not to share. He uses it as a collateral, something to look down on another brother. I want to undo as much of that as I can. And people always speak about the crabs in the barrel. Crabs in the barrel is, I had a post that it said, we always speak about black people being the crabs in the barrel, but the problem is the barrel was not that crab's natural inhabitant. It learned to survive in the barrel, and the way in which it learned to survive is to pull the person in front of him down so he can move up. We have to realize we are all given many opportunities and gifts, and we have to share them and spread them so we don't feel so competitive amongst each other, that we do feel like sharing, and we're not very good at that. And part of that is from that mentality that was taught to us.
But when you look at the fraternities, sororities, the churches, all these the school systems, everything is geared toward divide and conquer.
I agree.
And it seems like we've totally bought into that. And when you try to address it, you're viewed as being a malcontent.
Yeah, you're viewed as being militant, unruly, rebellious. Those are words that are easily to deter someone. What we have to first let go of is fear. We're afraid of the change. And when I was a kid, I used to hear the saying all the time, can't have a whole bunch of chiefs, you got to have some Indians. We have a problem with establishing a leader or relinquishing power. Giving someone control doesn't mean you gave up your power. You're just giving them support. I think that we have to learn to support each other more, to do things collectively, to share the glory in things. Everybody wants to be recognized, but if we're truly going to grow, it's not about being recognized, it's about accomplishing some goals. We don't set goals, we just want the shine. We don't want to see the outcomes of the product. We just want to see the pretty cake. We don't want to know the work that goes into it. We don't want to divvy up the work that goes into it. We just want to see the end product and put my name on it. We don't want to be all the little pieces that went into it. And we have to get away from that. The only way I can personally see us getting away from that is to empower within small groups. Do smaller things to show recognition. Because for our people, for some odd reason, that was our response to when we got free. We wanted to be seen. We didn't realize that the work was not about being seen. The work was about doing. So we have to get away from wanting to be seen, but the sad part is, to do that, we're going to have to let people be seen. We're going to have to put people more into the forefront and allow them to have their voice and let them be heard, and then pull them in to work together. You got to give a little to get a lot.
So, do you think that one of the problems here, in not just Fort Wayne history, but just in other cities' histories, is that people became spoiled with Martin Luther King, in that because Martin Luther King was such a strong, powerful, and innovative black pastor, that we automatically gave the pastors a pass and just assumed that they had the same leadership capabilities when they didn't?
Yes, I do. I think that for some of the walk in the ministry life is a very tough walk. And I think sometimes we don't hold them to the accord that we should. People always say one accord, but if you break down the word accord, it's a musical term. And what it means is when a sound is steadily flowing on the same, and it's all in sync with each other. We don't work that way, though. We abuse that term. One accord is a very, very, very special thing. It means that when you hear a melodic sound, you ever heard a sound played so perfectly and there was nothing off about that sound? That's what one accord means. We as a people are supposed to be so together that you don't see the indifference. With the pastors, I think that we've allowed them to take a hold of us without making them accountable. Reading from the Bible just isn't enough for me. I need to see what works you do. Being a pastor is as much about giving into the community as it is about standing in the pulpit a couple of times a week and taking an offering. I don't see pastors doing that, and when they do, it's done in such a prideful way that it loses its meaning. People don't see the work they did. The words they start with is not "this was accomplished," but "my pastor did this." Who cares what your pastor did? If that community benefited is what we're supposed to care about, and we don't do that anymore. We're more concerned with one up in the next pastor by what this pastor did to make him look better, or make his church look better, or what he added to his church in a physical sense. We're not building up the community, and the church is actually the outside body. It's not meant for those who are already in Christ or whatever your faith is. It's meant for those who are not. And we've gotten away from that. We don't invite the community in like we used to. We're so set on our parishioners and pleasing them, and them in turn paying us, that they don't build up the surrounding areas. Go to the homes. What happened to the days of just walking down the street and visiting with your neighbors and giving back and finding out that this child needed a coat and bringing that family a coat back? Those are the things within the community that bring togetherness. That's not about the pastor, that's about the actual church body.
But it sounds like you might be interested in one day seeing the pastors who consider themselves to be leaders to come together in one forum and be questioned by the community.
I feel like we have to hold them accountable. Questioning would probably be what occurred, but for me, it would be no different than a politician and me understanding what platform you stand on. I want to know what it is that you bring to this community and the people you serve that is going to make a difference. This is the city of churches, yet and still we see no unity. The pillar of the community used to be the church, in the center of when all these cities were founded, was a church. Everything was done within that church building. The laws, the trials, the whatever was done within that building.
Well, let me disagree with you for a minute. Mm-hmm. I recently spoke with a pastor, and he said the pastors are together. It's the people who are divided. And then when I brought it up to the pastor but you all are the leaders of the people. How do we go with that?
I have a problem with that pastor only because you can't blame the sheep. If a shepherd's sheep are all over the city, I can go collect his sheep, but I can't punish the sheep. It'll be the shepherd that I address my issues to. So for as much as people don't like to be referred to as sheep, when you choose a pastor, you're choosing a shepherd. You are choosing someone to lead you. You are there responsible. That's why I said being a minister is a very important calling, because so much is supposed to be on your shoulders. Martin Luther King was a very unique minister. Everybody is not going to be as powerful as he was in affecting people as a mass. But when you have the ear of the people, which if you're a minister and you have a following, you do have those people's ear, it is your job to build and strengthen within your church. It is your job to educate within your church. It is your job to share. They can say the ministers are together, but coming together for a coat drive isn't together. Coming together for some change, some political reform, that's more of together. What I have a problem with is that they feel like church and state should be separate. It's easier to collect people in the church house than it is to collect people at the state house. And the same people who are not voting are going to church every Sunday. So if I am ever to inform them about the things that are affecting them, I have to go to where they are. I cannot expect them to show up to where I am. A man of the people has to go to where the people are. People are in the church. I can't educate you. I have to bring the issues and the concerns to you. And I don't think our ministers do that. They have what they believe. They teach their parishioners that, and then they go and huddle together and speak about what they feel like is the people's concern. But the people aren't present, and we don't know if that's what the people's concerns are. We're taking these leaders' words at face value. I don't think that we should do that. I believe that there needs to be more accountability, and there's not. We just take them at face value, hope for the best, let them get a couple of news coverage pieces, see them in the paper a couple of times, and we're satisfied with that. I personally am not. I am more pleased when I see the parishioners out in the community doing things, because that tells me that your leader is instructing you. He's giving you, and he's empowering you to do something for the community. It shouldn't just be the pastors out. If you're doing a good job, then your members should be out. They should be just as much a part of your works as you are. It shouldn't just be about the pastors. But we as a community don't group together that way. Not sure why.
I see that you have a book with you. What is that book about?
While I was at the Million Man March, this was a book that Minister Farrakhan provided us after he spoke for part 2, which was the day after the march. And the reason I bought this book is because I am constantly asked, well, what's the purpose of the Million Man March? I laugh because I write mission statements for people, and they always end with a period. What I found about this mission statement, it was more of a calling and a question. Like, what are you going to do? And if you don't mind, I'd like to read the mission statement of it. It says, the Million Man March and Day of Absence can only have a lasting value if we continue to work and struggle beyond this day. Thus, our challenge is to take the spirit of this day, the process of mobilization, and the possibilities of organization, and turn them into ongoing structures and practices directed towards our liberation and flourishing as a people. Flourishing in itself means to grow, to broaden, and expand. When you think of flourishing, you can imagine a flower opening up. That is my problem with churches. They are all stuck in the church house. They are not growing and expanding out into the communities. That will make a lasting change if we can do that. We're not doing that, though. We're very much stuck in that old shouting on Sunday and then going back to work for the master on Monday mentality. We have to undo that to see that we can have a lasting impact with just, and we're sabotaged. Even in Fort Wayne is one of the funniest cities. Neighborhoods are super important. But yet and still, 2 children will live on 2 different sides of the street. They cannot build up that relationship of walking to and from school because one is bus clear out to keep the racial divide lines correct, and the other one is bus clear on the other sides of town, and the community is systematically set up so you can't connect with one another. I don't know if that was, I know it was intentionally done, but at the time it was an argument of, well, I want my kids to get the same opportunities as the kids all over town. My problem is, why didn't you build up the school within your community instead of busing your child into the next community? And Fort Wayne's response was to bus. And I know it was as a result of a lawsuit that occurred.
That the pastors, I think, brought forward, if I'm not mistaken.
Union Baptist.
And the idea, I think, was that you needed a white person next to you to learn.
And that was my problem. Because, and when you ask me why, because that's where these churches who reside in these communities could be going out. They could be more involved. They could be participating in the Parent-Teacher Association. There are things that this city of churches that has all of these churches that could be doing to grow our community. And when they tell me that they're unified, I don't see it, because the things that are meant to unify us, that run our children's day. My son goes from school to home, church, back again, and we repeat the cycle all during the week. These are not people, he should see the same people within the circle and within our neighborhood. He doesn't. Each set of people is a different set of people implying their views on my son. He hears everybody's opinions and everybody's views about how he's supposed to respond, what he's supposed to do. Now, at the end of the day, it is ultimately, as his parent, my job. But he has a working brain, so his brain will absorb whatever it so chooses. I cannot control that. I can only make sure that my piece is greater, larger, and more monumental in his day. But there's no consistency in these children's day. It's different sets of people with different views, all contributing to our kids and adults' upbringing.
What I've noticed is the only consistency here in Fort Wayne is divide and conquer.
I'd say for some aspects. There are groups that are, I am very fortunate to participate in several communities within Fort Wayne. One community I'm very fond of that is bridging into the south side of town is the Multicultural Council in Fort Wayne. It is made up of varying races, varying backgrounds, various educational backgrounds, various religious backgrounds, and they work very hard to try to be inclusive and learn to bring back. Fort Wayne is afraid to make ripples, and they keep the black people at bay. If we complain about something, they build it up just enough to pacify us. They don't really, and we don't empower each other. We're more in a competitive thing. One of the things I laughed about is one of the movements is buy black. I laugh because I want to buy black, but there are no black businesses for me to buy from. So as much as I need to buy black, I need to encourage to build black too. Now, that is where Fort Wayne suffers. We are horrible with paperwork. And we live in a capitalist society that is built on paperwork. Black people have great, wonderful ideas, but we were never, not many of us, and not our natural upbringing, was to do things in an orderly, consistent, paperwork type of practice. We have to get to that place. We have to educate. We have to make each other stronger so we can build, and we're not doing that. So as much as we are divide and conquer, we've allowed these divides in us. We've allowed these craters because we don't share. We get our little huddles, and we're comfortable with that. We have no problem feeling like I'm great over here, so I don't have to make the next man great. But each one should teach one, and we don't practice that as we should.
You know, as you wind down here, how did Minister Farrakhan impress you?
As a man, I have met plenty of eloquent speakers in my lifetime, as short as it has been. I've met some really great speakers. What was impressive about him is how he explained from backwards to forwards the importance of the family unit with woman and then man. I thought he was strong. He shelled off weakness, and he had no fear. It's nice to see a leader who's not afraid of the consequences of someone's opinions or behaviors. It made me feel empowered. It made me feel like I could trust him. I think that we lack that in our leaders today. There's very little trust. We're more concerned about what they can do for us than trusting them to do what's right. For him, he held my trust. He held my interest. His conversation was very powerful. He was very in tune with everything from my small children to 67-year-olds to the baby boomers to the middle-agers like myself. So it's very hard to gain the ear of so many different age ranges and it all be relevant. And he did that. His conversation was all about the building. It wasn't about tearing people down, and it was fact-based. And when you had questions about the facts, he gave you where to go to get that. He was very confident in what he said, and he came with fact, research, and reference. Not many speakers can do that.
And last thing here, what do you say to people here in Fort Wayne who felt that by going to Washington, it would make you dislike white people more, and that it would somehow make you more rebellious and to where they got certain things twisted. I mean, what do you want to say to them to let them know that you didn't come back here as a racist?
No, I didn't. A definition was given to me while I was there, and it was a separatist and segregationist. And a separatist is someone who believes that people, I'll start with the segregation. Segregationists believe that you should be separate, but that one should rule over the other. A separatist believes that it's okay to be separate, but both people will have equal power, strength, and capabilities. When I left, I felt more capable. I don't want to speak to white privilege because I am still reading and trying to understand what that exactly means. But what I will speak to is that there is a definite difference between how blacks have come up through the ranks and how whites have come up through the ranks. And what I don't want them to think is just because I wanted to be more informed about how to better my culture, my race, my ethnicity, that it wasn't a challenge against you. It was a betterment of the generations that are coming behind me. If I ever have intentions on undoing the madness that was done to my forefathers, then I have to be as knowledgeable as possible, as empowered as possible, and as up on my game as possible. Well, no one knocks the Jewish people for coming together during their holidays and celebrating their holidays. For me, the Million Man March is very much a black holiday. It is a time for us to celebrate, to gain knowledge, to grow. It's a powerful workshop that more of us should partake in. I left because I said there should be small city Million Man Marches. It should be little cities that just do them to encourage. Everybody has the excuse, oh, I couldn't afford to travel. I would just like him to go to cities within each state, to every capital, and hold a Million Man March and allow people to travel from that state there to get that message versus trying to collectively get us all together. I feel like it would be more impactful and that more of us will be able to grab onto those coattails and go with him. Right now, people are so focused on going to Washington, D.C. and the cost and everything that they forget the message. The message was about giving us tools and strategies and things to go back and research so we could be a greater people and undo the knowledge and the information that's being shelled down through our children. My son should not learn that the slave trade was a migration, but that is very much what they're teaching students. I needed to know. I didn't know that's what they were writing in Texas books. It's not in our books here yet. But it will come this way. Now I'm more prepared. Now I can take what was learned there, the paths that those people took to undo that madness, and when it gets here, I'll be more prepared. Knowledge is power. Education is power. But we have to self-educate, and you have to have awareness of self. So I went to the Million Man March to be more aware of self, to learn more about myself, to see other people like myself who had the same questions and who had some answers that I had not gotten yet. So I grew as a person. I will grow more. I continue to read. And that's what I expected to get. It's what I want them to know. This was not about you. It was about me bettering me and getting knowledge for me to pass on to my younger brothers and sisters of color who may not get the opportunity that I was given.